Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the museum's Tuesday Treasure program, where we go through some of the lesser seen items in the museum's collection. My name, as always, is Nicole Carpenter. I am the Director of Programs and Collections here at the Westport Museum for History and Culture. We are pleased to offer this program free of charge today, but we do always appreciate any donations that can be made. We do have a suggested donation of $5. But again, we greatly appreciate anything that you can do to support the museum at this time. While this program is recorded, please do enter any comments, questions, or anecdotes that you have into the comments box, and I and my staff will get to them after this program has aired. So today, we are going through some items related to schooling and education in Connecticut, and then also in Westport more specifically. Before we jump into the individual items, I wanted to go through a few of the highlights of Connecticut's educational past. So the first code of laws in Connecticut are requested in 1646. That is when, again, the first requests for these laws are put up. But about 4 years later in 1650 is when the first draft is actually completed. And it's completed by Roger Ludlow, who many Connecticut residents will know as the founder of Fairfield back in 1639. He actually leaves for Europe very early in the mid-17th century, but he completes this draft before he leaves. And one thing that it lists in this code is that if a town has over 50 families, it must have a school teacher. And if it has over 100 families, it has to have a schoolhouse. This is one of the first tenets that we see in Connecticut's past that has to do with schooling for the public. By December of 1673, a revised code, which is printed by the first printer in North America named Samuel Green, is actually printed and distributed to towns. Copies are actually given to every family, and it is required by law to purchase a copy of this code so that everyone is on the same page. By 1795, the Connecticut General Assembly actually takes control from parishes, individual parishes. This is when we see schooling become a bit more distanced from religious teachings. It, of course, is still very closely connected, but that's when the control of these schools is actually taken from kind of the towns themselves. At this point in time, male teachers are paid $9 to $12 a month during the winter. But in the summertime, when these male teachers are usually helping with farming in their community, remember this is the 18th century, female teachers would actually move into the position over the summer and early fall, but they were only paid $4 to $6 a month. So unfortunately, there is this precedent for lower pay for women, which still continues in some cases even today. By 1868, Connecticut had adopted tuition-free schooling. It's during this period that we also start to see the decline of one-room schoolhouses or these smaller schools, and we see larger kind of neighborhood schools emerging. And that is definitely the case in Westport as well. It's actually around this period that Adams Academy, which is a one-room schoolhouse that still exists in Westport today, is actually owned by the town, but it is actually, the building is lent to the museum for some of our private use when we are doing educational programs. That schoolhouse, Adams Academy, closes in 1867 after 30 years of use. So we see that schoolhouse decline happening in Westport along with the rest of Connecticut. There are also several other people and institutions in Connecticut that are very influential for the state. In 1833, Prudence Crandall establishes the first academy in New England for African American women. And then there is also the American School for the Deaf, which has served those hard of hearing and completely deaf since 1817. Wonderful additions to our kind of schooling and educational past in a bit more of an inclusive way. So let's jump into the items that we see out on the table before us. These are all a part of the museum's permanent collection. I do have my archival gloves on today when I'm handling any of these objects. So the first that we'll take a look at is this child's slate. This is from roughly about 1880. It is, of course, a slate in the middle here. It does have some cracking, and you can actually see some of the flaking from slate itself, which it is known to do. And it's in this lovely wooden frame. One thing that this slate actually features down here in the corner, you can see that here, there are the initials EA. These are the initials for Ella Allen. We actually have another slate that is almost identical to this that has the initials LA carved into it, which belongs to Ella's brother, Lloyd. This slate was actually used by Ella during her time at the Shercrow School, which was another one-room schoolhouse in Westport. Now, slates such as this were used to teach mostly writing, but also were used for mathematics and other kind of shorthand teaching. And they were used, again, this is from about 1880 throughout the 19th century. They actually hit their decline in about the 1930s when paper becomes a much less inexpensive material to use. And the way that this would be used was actually by using either another piece of slate or perhaps shale or chalk, which all left marks. They were less dense, and they left these very faint marks on the board that could then be rubbed away with a cloth. And for quite some time, it was actually preferable to use the stone materials because chalk, of course, leaves dust when you wipe it. So it was actually sometimes preferable to use the rock materials. Slate, of course, is a volcanic rock made from ash or clay, apparently. And again, as I mentioned, this kind of implement declines by the 1930s with the rise of pencils and paper being a less inexpensive material to use in the classroom. We would jump forward in time about 40 years, to about 1920 to take a look at this desk. Now, this is a child's desk. We can see from the height, it is for quite a short young person. So this is probably an elementary school desk. This is actually a lifting desk. So you'll see that the seat actually folds up and in. And I believe, yes, so just the seat there, but this would be used in multiples. So this seat actually has the student behind it. It also has the desk attached. So this is all one piece. It is quite heavy. It has cast iron legs on the underside. And these desks would be actually placed in a row so that every child had both a seat and the desk. And it does have a built-in kind of pencil rest here as well, or it might have been used for kind of those slate pencils as we discussed, if they were still being used at this time. This desk was donated by Sherry Cochran and her family. The third item I'd like to show you today is in the front. This is a salvaged brick from the original Staples High School. You can see that it is a white brick, and it actually has a silk screen black text and image on the front. The image that appears is the original Staples High School. And then on the brick, it actually reads, Class of 1943, Staples High School, Westport, Connecticut. And it also has the range of use of the original school from 1884 to 1967. Now, this brick, of course, as I mentioned, was salvaged from the original building when it was torn down. And this was, of course, these bricks were salvaged, but then the silk screen was done by the class of 1943 as a gift. It is made by S&F Co., and this was donated by David Richard. Now, his mother, Alzida Louise Allen Richard, actually attended Staples High School at the original building between 1907 and 1910. We actually have a kind of album or a notebook from her time at Staples High School, which has some really wonderful notes in it that we might take a look at sometime in the future. This family is also connected to the Westport institution of the Allen's Clam House, which is very well known in town. We know that the original high school was built in 1884. It is financed by Horace Staples, who becomes its namesake. And on June 24th of 1887, the very first graduating class to actually receive a diploma consists of 6 female students who were the entirety of that very first graduating class. Very, very small class sizes at the very beginning. It, of course, expands into larger buildings, and today it comprises a very large campus. The last item that we're going to take a look at today is this red item in the front here, kind of in the middle, actually. Now, this item is called a Crest Board, and this dates from about 1916. The label up at the top of the board reads, Original Reversible Crest Educational Board. And around the edges, you can see different nursery rhymes. There's Humpty Dumpty, there's Goldilocks. I think there's also, I think it might be the Old Woman in the Shoe, but there are many of them on both sides, and it is actually the same on both sides of the board. It has this red ring with these nursery rhymes. The only difference is the front consists of 22 pieces, which are letters, and on the back it is actually numbers along with a plus and minus, as well as a multiplication symbol. This board, or boards like it, were actually created by childhood friends John H. Fox and Horatio G. Cress, who between 1912 and 1917 patented educational boards with letters and numbers on their reversible sides. The first educational board, not the Crest Board, but the first board of this type, called a board or a tablet, first appeared in the United States in the 1840s. And it was meant to help students, again, on the number side with simple arithmetic, and on the letter side, it could be a part of spelling exercises and also very, very simple sentences. Part of why a slate was used was because it was inexpensive. The Crest Board was reusable as well. You didn't need to erase the board or throw a piece of paper away. You could simply rearrange the letters, so it was very economical. These boards were also called spellers, number boards, letter or counting boards, as well as alphabet boards. Our item is made of fiberboard. There are actually at least three layers that you can see on the edge that are all compacted together, and then it has this printed label on the front. They could also be used or created out of plywood, heavy cardboard, or plastic. This board also has some metal attachments on the back of the board as well. That kind of created a tray for the board to sit on. This particular board belonged to Bessie Jennings, who was a teacher in Westport. And this particular board was donated by Mildred E. Duhigg, who was a former student of Bessie's. Those are all of the items that we have to show you today, but I do hope that you will tune in for our Tuesday Treasures in the future. Again, this is a recording, so if you have any questions, please put them in the comments box, and we will respond with a comment after this has aired. We also encourage you to join the museum in October, when we will be kicking off our month-long programming series that we call Spooktober, where we will be exploring the spooky and different kind of Halloween themes related to Westport and Connecticut's larger past. So Thank you so much for joining me, and enjoy the rest of your time.